Hi everyone, I'm Natalie Willis, the founder of Baby Sleep Trainer, and I have spent the last decade, or more than a decade, helping families around the world get their babies to sleep through the night and take healthy naps. And through this work with so many thousands of clients, I have come across a lot of information that I think will help the everyday family decide how to approach sleep and sleep training in their own family. Today I want to talk about sleep training methods that range from NoCry all the way to Extinction. I thought about a couple of different ways to talk about this subject with you, and I thought, should I think about all of the popular sleep training methods and describe each one? But there's so many out there, and it really is better to think about them on a spectrum because that's really kind of where all of these different sleep training methods lie. And also understanding the spectrum can help you place any method that you've heard of that I haven't heard of or haven't talked about and know where it falls on the spectrum. And most importantly, how do you know which method is right for your particular child? So let's jump right in. Let's start with NoCry sleep training methods. I think NoCry sleep training is, what's that called? Oxymoron. Let's back up and talk about what sleep training is and talk about why it's not really possible to sleep train with a NoCry sleep training method. Sleep training is a process by which your child learns to fall asleep independently, meaning you can walk into a room that has white noise on and darkness. It's a really dark room with a lot of white noise. And you can place your baby down on their back with no swaddle, no sleep props. You can leave them wide awake, and they can go from that stage to being completely asleep, totally 100% on their own. And they can do that consistently for all of their naps and at bedtime. The idea here is that if your child can fall asleep independently for their naps and bedtime, then they are able to put themselves back to sleep when they wake up overnight. It's normal for babies to wake up. It's normal for all human beings to wake up regularly overnight. You don't even need to eliminate all overnight feedings in order for your baby to technically be sleep trained. If your pediatrician says, hey, your little one needs one feeding in a 12-hour period or two feedings in a 12-hour period, or whatever it might be for your particular child, they can wake up and have those feedings that they need and go back to sleep, and they're still sleep trained. The idea is that they are independent sleepers, so other wakings that occur overnight that are not due to hunger, they're able to put themselves back to sleep without your help. But they really do need to be able to do it for naps and bedtime, not just for bedtime. So many babies need to be sleep trained is because when they come home from the hospital, most babies will pretty much just sleep all the time. Sometimes they'll sleep through their baths, they'll definitely sleep through their feedings, they will sleep through pretty much all of their caretaking activities. And usually sometime around the 6 or 7 or 8 week mark, you kind of notice that they wake up. And they don't sleep so easily through everything, where you could take them out and have them in a crowded room and they just slept through everything. Now you notice that they're starting to get woken up by loud sounds. Maybe they're starting to be a little bit more particular about the way they are put to sleep. Maybe you notice that, gee, I think that my baby took every single nap today in my arms because every time I tried to put them down, they woke up right away, right? They're starting to show these preferences, but usually most newborns are relying on some form of assistance to get to sleep. The other reason this is the case is because thankfully we know that babies are far safer when they are put to sleep on their backs, which is great. But before Back to Sleep became a popular campaign in the US, most of us, so me for example, I was put to sleep on my stomach. In fact, my mother was told that that was the safest place for me to sleep. When a baby sleeps on their stomach, their legs and their arms are kind of tucked up under each other, and their normal Moro reflex kind of dampened a bit because they don't really have that ability to move, so they tend to sleep a little bit more easily. But when you basically ask a child to sleep on their back, that's when you're introducing all of this assistance to sleep, which is good, okay, normal, and what we should do because that's safest for baby. But what Back to Sleep also produces is many babies needing some help to learn how to fall asleep on their own. I also like to use the analogy of training wheels on a bike. So the training wheels on the bike are you helping your baby to sleep or them relying on swaddle or rocking or a yoga ball or whatever it is that they need in order to go to sleep. Those are the training wheels on their sleep bicycle. And when they get older, what happens, especially after the 4 or 5 month mark, is that those overnight wakings that we talked about, they start to become far more regular, and they happen at the end of every sleep cycle. So maybe your baby's not waking up 5, 7, 8. I've heard of babies waking up as many as 10 or 12 times overnight, needing the same assistance to get back to sleep as they get during the day for their naps and bedtime. So sleep training has to do with letting your child learn how to fall asleep on their own. But what you can probably imagine is that if your child has a preference for something and you take it away, guess what they're going to do to tell you that they don't like having to figure this out on their own? They're going to cry. And I equate the concept of a no-cry solution with a 5-year-old coming home from school, getting off the school bus and saying, I'm really upset because this thing happened at school, and you saying to them, your crying is so upsetting for me that I am going to put something in your mouth like a cookie to keep you from crying. because I don't want you to cry. And I understand that families who follow attachment parenting do not see this crying relationship that way. And there is space in this world for every family who wants to parent any particular way that they want. If what I'm saying does not resonate with you and you're like, ow, actually that's not how I look at it. I don't want my baby to cry because I think it makes them feel X, Y, or Z. That is your baby and you get to decide what works right for your family. And if not allowing your child to express their feelings via crying is what feels right to you, I am not here to tell you that you're doing the wrong thing. But what I am here to tell you is that if your goal is for your child to learn the skill of independent sleep, you need to allow them, or you need to feel comfortable with them expressing how they feel at having to learn that skill. And wanting them to learn the skill of independent sleep while disallowing their expression of their feelings, those two things don't work. So when you encounter a no-cry method and a family says, yeah, it worked for me, usually what they're saying is a couple of different things. One, they have a baby whose temperament is extremely laid back. And so they just really aren't going to cry that much about anything. I've known a baby, not a client, this was a friend's child, who was of such demure temperament that they weren't really eating very much and weren't able to suck, and mom didn't really realize that her milk supply was diminished. It was her third child, so she had had a strong milk supply with her first two, just kind of missed the radar until she got a report from the doctor that the child had lost a significant amount of weight. They were like, oh, why wasn't the baby crying? That's just his temperament. He's super, super chill. Some babies just really don't cry that much. So if you find a baby who's like, oh, this no-cry sleep method worked, it's not really the method that worked, it's that that baby wasn't really going to complain about any method. To be really clear, in a no-cry method, generally this means that you're going to potentially observe your child's wake times closely. And when you detect that your child might be wanting to go to sleep, you're going to go into the room and you're going to put them down, but you're going to stay with them. And you are either essentially going to assist them to sleep, which is literally the opposite of sleep training, so you're not actually sleep training, or maybe you're sitting in one method I'm familiar with, maybe you're sitting in a chair and you're next to your baby and you're not interacting with them, but when they cry, you're calming them, but never to the point of assisting them to sleep. So then you're retreating and allowing, once they calm, for them to fall asleep, but you can kind of think about what's gonna happen. That baby's gonna start to cry again, so there's a lot of back and forth. And then, you know, of course, if the baby becomes so upset, then you stop everything. And you're, again, not really accomplishing anything. So the idea behind a no-cry method is that you are not allowing your child to cry, and you're seeing if they can somehow figure out how to go to sleep without your help and also without crying. And again, it never really works unless the child is so easygoing that you just put them down and they're like, oh, this is interesting, I'm kind of tired, I think I'll go to sleep. And they probably would have learned to sleep without using any method at all. No-cry methods, which aren't really methods at all, and the only time they work is for babies who tend to be really chill and laid back, or they don't really work, and families find that they're in this ongoing, literally months, sometimes years long process of what they consider to be sleep training without ever really having any progress. And they often also have reasons or excuses for why the training isn't working. Well, they're teething, or it's this regression, or this other thing is wrong. And if you really look at it, then the totality, the child's never really learned the skill because the method didn't really work. So as we move along in the spectrum, let's go to the other extreme. This is Extinction. I actually don't know. It's possible that there is a book or some sort of written methodology around Extinction. I'm not familiar with it, because Extinction means that you put your baby down in a crib in a room, shut the door, and don't return for 12 hours. And doesn't matter how long they cry, you just don't go back to them. For a variety of reasons, don't think this is an appropriate or safe, healthy, or really even necessary way to approach sleep training. First of all, in the baby sleep training method, we talk a lot about what's happening with your baby's sleep in the time approaching bedtime. The secret sauce of the method really has to do with how we're approaching bedtime in the home. Is going to have an enormous impact on both the duration, the intensity of your baby's cries. So you could be using an Extinction method, or you could be doing Extinction with your baby, which I would never recommend because it's not safe. But let's say someone is choosing to do this with their baby. They're not handling the bedtime routine correctly, because Extinction doesn't have anything to do with their bedtime routine, right? It just has to do with not responding overnight. Then that child might be unnecessarily crying a lot once they're done at bedtime, because you didn't even know that you should have been doing anything with their bedtime routine. Also, it's dangerous. Babies could actually be crying for something that they need, and if you have committed to not checking on them, there is any number of things that could be happening overnight that I'm not even going to go into, because I don't need to introduce other things that you need to be scared about happening with your baby overnight that you're gonna miss because you have some sort of guidance that you're not supposed to interact with them overnight. And the really interesting thing to me about people talking about Extinction methods of training is that it never really addresses naps. naps. It always has to do with nighttime sleep. But if you're doing Extinction overnight and I've had many families come to me and be like, I shut the door at 7 o'clock. I don't go in until 7 p.m. at night. I don't go in until 7 o'clock in the morning. And my baby is still crying for extended periods of bedtime and they're still waking up a bunch overnight. And I'll say, what are you doing for naps? Oh, well, we never really got to naps. We're still helping them to sleep for naps. The reason your baby's not sleeping overnight, even though you are practicing Extinction and not interacting with them overnight, is because they're still getting assisted to sleep during the day. And they cannot, for the life of them, understand why you are willing to assist them to sleep for naps, but you're unwilling to assist them when they wake up overnight. Another thing is the closer you get to the morning, so 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 a.m., the harder it's going to get for your baby to sleep because there's less melatonin in their body. So they tend to have they experience more periods of wakefulness and more disruption in their sleep. So they may even go to sleep relatively easily at bedtime, but once they wake up once overnight for a feeding, they may have a harder and harder time getting back to sleep because they don't have a skill set to access because you're still assisting them to sleep during the day. And Extinction, what is Extinction during the day? Does that mean you put your baby down and you just don't come back until they fall asleep? What if they're awake for so many hours that they need to eat? Because most babies need to be eating every 2.5 to 3.5 hours during the day. Well, if you put a child down and you feed them and you don't have any guidance on how to keep them awake during the feeding, they're just going to fall asleep during the feeding. So now you're assisting them to sleep during the day. Chaos. Really, what we want to do is find a method in the middle that allows you to create a plan that tells you how to approach bedtime, how to check on your baby to make sure they're safe both at bedtime, overnight, how to know how many feedings they need overnight, how to approach those feedings so it's not disrupting their sleep, and also extremely importantly, what are you going to do for naps? How are you going to get them on an eat-wake sleep cycle? When you put them down for a nap, what's the appropriate way to do that? And how long are you going to wait to see if they fall asleep? And what are you going to do if they don't fall asleep? When are you going to try again? How do you keep them awake during the day? These are all the components of a plan that you need in order to be successful. And in terms of how to know what type of method is best for your child, let's say that you have two methods. I won't even use baby sleep trainer method as an example, and I'm not even going to name any other methods, but let's say we have one method that involves checking in on your child during naps physically, regardless of their age, so it's touching and talking to them. And let's say we have another method at the same age and you can check on them, but only from several feet away, right? No matter the child's age. One involves touching and one doesn't. The more that you interact with your child in a method, so whatever the outline of the method is, the more it involves you and every level of interaction, so from your voice to your body to picking them up to staying in the room, the more involved you are, right? The less that type of method is going to be effective when you think about how strong-willed your child is. So we have a spectrum of temperament of a super easygoing baby and an incredibly touchy, sensitive, not easygoing baby who is really good at letting you know exactly what they want and don't want from an uncannily early age. Okay, this is a really strong-willed baby. This is a really easygoing baby. The more hands-on that your method is, the less well it's going to work with the strong-willed baby. So if you have a really strong-willed child, you should be gravitating towards a method that involves you just enough to make sure that your baby is healthy and safe, but not so much that it's going to keep them awake. Because if your child is strong-willed, the only thing that they want, all babies, all they want when they're sleep training is for you to help them go to sleep. And if you're not going to give that to them, the stronger-willed a child is, the more pissed they're going to be when you present yourself as an option to help and don't give it to them. They don't want you to soothe them. They don't want you to calm them down. They do not think you have abandoned them. Those are all myths and those are all feelings that we project onto our children during sleep training. What your child wants is they want you to assist them to sleep. And if you're not willing to assist them to sleep, nothing else is really going to make them happy, and they're just going to get more and more and more upset. So the stronger willed your child is, the more hands-off of a method you should pick. The easier going your child is, the less it really matters what method you pick, because they're all probably going to work because your baby's pretty easygoing to begin with. If you like what I had to say today, please make sure to like and subscribe, and also don't forget to hit the bell because that notifies you every time I put out a new video so you won't miss any great new content.